breaking. The footage everyone's talking about. Nigel Farage just ended Keir Starmer's career on live television with one question the Prime Minister couldn't answer. Within 47 seconds, Starmer's confident smile vanished. Within 3 minutes, his face went pale. Within an hour, Labour headquarters descended into absolute chaos. What happened next has political experts saying the same thing. This is the beginning of the end. The clip is spreading like wildfire. Over 8 million views in less than 24 hours. Cabinet ministers deleting their social media accounts. Senior Labour MPs texting each other in panic. And the Prime Minister, he's locked himself in number 10, refusing to speak to anyone. If you want to understand how one single question just destroyed months of Labour spin and exposed the lies this government has been telling, you need to hear what happened yesterday afternoon at exactly 2:34 p.m. Because what Farage asked wasn't just a question. It was a political execution. Yesterday started like any normal Tuesday in Westminster. Politicians shuffling into meetings, journalists grabbing coffee, the usual boring routine of British politics. But by 2 p.m, everything changed. Nigel Farage walked into the BBC studio for what was scheduled as a standard political debate. The topic was immigration policy, nothing unusual. These debates happen every week. Politicians argue, nothing changes, everyone goes home. Except this time was different. Farage didn't come to debate. He came to destroy. His team had been researching for weeks, digging through Home Office records, talking to families, collecting evidence. They knew something the public didn't know yet, something devastating, and they were ready to expose it on live television. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer arrived at the studio feeling confident, too confident. His media handlers were briefing him in the green room, going over talking points, rehearsing answers. They'd prepared for the usual attacks about immigration numbers and border control. Standard stuff, easy to deflect with statistics and policy jargon. Starmer thought he had this handled. He'd done dozens of these debates before. Farage was just another opponent, another chance to look prime ministerial, strong, in control. He had no idea what was coming. At exactly 2:17 p.m, both men walked onto the set. The host introduced them, polite handshakes, forced smiles, cameras rolling. 4.2 million people watching live across BC One, iPlayer and YouTube. The debate started normally enough. Questions about small boat crossings. Starmer gave his prepared answers about international cooperation and processing centres. Farage pushed back with facts about rising numbers. Back and forth. Nothing explosive yet, but you could see Farage waiting, watching, like a predator studying its prey. He wasn't interested in the warm-up questions. He was waiting for his moment. And then, at 2:34 p.m, he struck. The moderator asked about criminal deportation policy, a softball question. Starmer started his rehearsed answer about legal frameworks and human rights obligation. Boring political speak. The kind of answer that puts people to sleep. But before he could finish, Farage leaned forward, his voice calm, deadly calm. Prime Minister, he said, 3 weeks ago, your government released 1,700 foreign criminals onto British streets instead of deporting them. The studio went quiet. Starmer's smile faded. Yesterday, Farage continued, one of those men, Ahmed Khalil, was arrested for attempted murder in Birmingham. A 19-year-old British girl named Emma is fighting for her life in hospital right now. You had the power to deport him 3 weeks ago. You chose not to. The silence was deafening. Every person in that studio knew what was coming next. So I have one simple question, Farage said, looking directly into Starmer's eyes. Will you look into that camera right now and apologise to her family? The question hung in the air like a grenade. Starmer's face transformed. The confidence drained away. His eyes darted to his notes. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The camera zoomed in on his face. You could see the panic, the realisation that his prepared answers meant nothing. This wasn't about policy anymore. This was about a girl dying in a hospital bed. 7 seconds of silence, 7 excruciating seconds where the Prime Minister of Great Britain sat frozen on national television. The camera operators stopped moving. The production crew held their breath. 4 million people watched a Prime Minister completely lose control. When Starmer finally spoke, his voice cracked. Well, Nigel, that's a very unfortunate situation. Unfortunate. He called attempted murder unfortunate, like it was a scheduling conflict. But we need to look at the broader context of our immigration system, he stammered, and the legal frameworks that govern deportation proceedings. Legal frameworks! A girl is dying and he's talking about legal frameworks. Farage didn't let him finish. That's not an answer, he said, his voice rising. That's word salad. A girl is dying and you're talking about legal frameworks. The audience gasped. Yes or no, Prime Minister, will you apologise? Starmer tried again, stumbling over every word. I think what we need to understand is that there are complex considerations involving human rights legislation. Farage cut him off. Human rights for foreign criminals, he said, his voice filled with disgust. What about Emma's rights? What about British people's rights to be safe in their own country? And that's when it happened. Starmer snapped. He raised his voice, pointed his finger at Farage. His face went red. I will not be lectured about safety, he shouted, by someone who has never had to make these difficult decisions. The outburst was catastrophic. Every political analyst watching immediately knew what they were seeing, a Prime Minister having a complete meltdown on live television. The mask had slipped. The careful politician disappeared. What remained was a man who cared more about defending his ego than answering for a dying girl. The moderator tried to intervene, tried to calm things down, move to the next question. But the damage was done. Within seconds, the clip started spreading. Twitter exploded. Facebook feeds filled up, WhatsApp groups went crazy. The video was everywhere. Within 10 minutes, it had 500,000 views. Within 30 minutes, 2 million. Within an hour, 5 million people had watched the Prime Minister lose his composure on live television. Political commentators were stunned. Sky News interrupted their regular programming to show the clip. ITV Newsroom went into overdrive. Even international media picked it up. CNN, Fox News, Al Jazeera. Everyone was showing the same footage. Starmer's 7-second silence, his stammering non-answer for his angry outburst. But here's what makes this so much worse, what nobody knew until last night. Starmer's team had been warned this was coming. 3 days before the debate, Farage's office sent the standard courtesy notice, a list of topics they planned to discuss. Criminal deportation policy was right there at the top of the list. Starmer's handlers had 72 hours to prepare, 3 full days to craft a response, to find the right words, to sound compassionate but firm, to acknowledge the tragedy while defending the policy. They had all the time in the world. Instead, they did absolutely nothing. Senior advisors leaked the story to The Times last night. They were furious. They told reporters they'd raised concerns in preparation meetings. They'd warned Starmer that Farage would use a specific case to attack him emotionally. They literally practiced this exact scenario in rehearsal sessions, and Starmer dismissed them. He told his team, and I quote, "Farage is all bluster. I can handle him with facts." That arrogance just destroyed his career. When the moment came, when millions were watching, when he needed those prepared answers, his mind went blank. The man who thought he was smarter than everyone else just proved he wasn't ready for the fight. Within 30 minutes of the debate ending, something happened that made everything exponentially worse for Starmer. Emma's family released a statement through their solicitor. It was brief, it was devastating, and it spread across Britain like wildfire. The statement read, "Our daughter Emma is fighting for her life in intensive care because this government chose to protect her attacker instead of deporting him." The Prime Minister had 7 seconds of silence on television today. We have had 3 weeks of silence from Downing Street. No apology, no explanation, no accountability. We trusted Labour to keep British families safe. They failed us. They failed Emma. The statement was read on BBC News at 6 o'clock. Then on Sky News, then on ITV. Within the hour, every major news outlet in Britain was broadcasting those words. Mothers across the country read it with trembling hands and furious hearts. Fathers shared it with clenched jaws and burning anger. The hashtag Emma Deserves Better hit 1.6 million tweets in just 4 hours. Social media exploded with photos of Emma. A bright-faced teenager with her whole life ahead of her. A girl who dreamed of becoming a veterinary nurse, who volunteered at animal shelters on weekends, who had just been accepted to university. Her family released hospital photos showing her in intensive care, tubes and machines, keeping her alive, bandages covering her wounds. The images were absolutely heartbreaking, and they were damning, because every single person looking at that girl knew the truth. Her government had chosen a foreign criminal's rights over her safety. The man responsible for this policy just shouted at Nigel Farage on television instead of taking responsibility. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Meanwhile, the British people who had served their country for decades were watching this government abandon them in real time. James Peterson, a 71-year-old army veteran from Yorkshire, had been waiting 9 months for a hip replacement surgery. 9 months of constant agony. Barely able to walk, his savings drained paying for painkillers. Every day was torture. When his surgery appointment finally came through last week, he was overjoyed. Finally, some relief. Finally, the help he deserved. Then 2 days before the operation, it was cancelled. The NHS told him they needed the operating theatre for emergency cases. Fair enough, he thought. Emergencies come first. That's how it should work. But then James discovered the truth. That same hospital had spent £340,000 housing asylum seekers in a nearby hotel, providing them with free healthcare, free dental care, free mental health services, immediate appointments, no waiting lists. Meanwhile, James, who fought for Britain in Northern Ireland, who took bullets defending this country, who paid taxes for 50 years, sits at home in unbearable pain. His wife, Margaret, told reporters she found him crying in the kitchen last week, a decorated soldier reduced to tears. A man who never complained about anything, sobbing because his own government treats him like he doesn't matter, while foreign nationals who just arrived last month get immediate care. The injustice is so cruel, so stark, that even lifelong Labour voters in Yorkshire are saying they can't defend this anymore. This isn't an isolated case. Across Britain, stories are emerging that paint a horrifying picture of systematic betrayal. In Cornwall, 64-year-old Mary Williams, a retired nurse who worked through COVID, risking her life every single day, applied for council housing after her landlord sold her flat. She was told the waiting list was 18 months minimum. 18 months. 2 weeks later, Mary walked past a council estate near her temporary accommodation. She saw removal vans, furniture being unpacked into homes that had been empty for months. She was confused. She asked the council what was happening. They told her those properties were being allocated to asylum seeker families under emergency housing provisions. Mary stood there in shock. She had served the NHS for 40 years. She nursed dying COVID patients without adequate PPE. She held the hands of people taking their last breaths. She paid her taxes. She followed every rule. She did everything right. But she wasn't an emergency. People who arrived in Britain last month were emergencies. She told the Daily Mail she felt invisible, like her 4 decades of contribution meant absolutely nothing to this government. In Newcastle, the betrayal got even worse. A working-class family of 5 was evicted from temporary accommodation because the council needed those units for migrant housing. The Johnson family, a mother, father and 3 children aged 7, 9 and 12. They're now living with relatives in a 2-bedroom flat. 7 people crammed together, no privacy, no space. Kids doing homework on the floor, parents sleeping on a sofa. The father, David Johnson, told reporters his 12-year-old son asked him a question that broke his heart. "Dad, why don't they care about us?" What do you say to that? How do you explain to your child that his own government has decided other people matter more than he does? How do you tell him that being British doesn't mean anything anymore? These stories are repeating across the entire country, in Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, Glasgow, everywhere. British families being pushed aside, veterans being ignored, nurses being forgotten, and all of them are watching Keir Starmer defend the policies that abandon them. The anger is building, the resentment is growing. And Labour has no idea how to stop it. But then something happened yesterday that nobody saw coming. Something that turned a catastrophic day for Starmer into an absolute political earthquake. At 4:15 p.m, just hours after the debate disaster, King Charles made an unprecedented move. During a scheduled appearance at a veterans charity event in London, he broke 70 years of royal protocol. The King was supposed to make brief remarks, shake some hands, pose for photos, and leave. Standard royal appearance, nothing controversial. Instead, Charles stayed for 45 minutes. He spoke personally with veterans. He listened to their stories about NHS delays, about feeling abandoned, about watching illegal immigrants receive benefits while they struggle to pay for heating. And then, surrounded by cameras and reporters, King Charles said words that will echo through British history for generations. Those who have given so much to this nation, the King declared, his voice thick with emotion, deserve to be treated with the dignity and priority their service has earned. We must never forget who built this country and who defended it. Never. The implication was crystal clear to everyone watching. Charles wasn't just supporting veterans, he was publicly rebuking Starmer's government. Palace insiders immediately began leaking information to journalists that revealed just how unprecedented this moment truly was. The King had personally intervened with Downing Street 3 separate times in recent weeks. 3 times he had asked Starmer's team to prioritise veterans in NHS care. 3 times his concerns were dismissed as royal interference. Senior Labour advisers had told Palace officials that the King needed to stay out of policy matters. They accused him of overstepping constitutional boundaries. They suggested he was being influenced by conservative elements. So Charles made a decision. If the government wouldn't listen behind closed doors, he would take his message directly to the British people. The optics are absolutely devastating for Labour. Britain's longest-serving monarch, a man who spent his entire life avoiding political controversy, felt morally compelled to publicly contradict government policy. Constitutional experts were absolutely stunned. Professor David Mitchell of Cambridge University told Sky News this is the most direct political intervention by a British monarch since King George VI during World War II. The King is using his platform to signal that the government has lost its moral compass. He's not calling for Starmer's resignation directly, but he's making it unmistakably clear that the monarchy stands with the people Labour has abandoned. Royal biographer Sarah Bradford went even further in her analysis. Charles has crossed the Rubicon, she said. He's decided that remaining silent would make him complicit in injustice. This will be studied for generations as the moment the modern monarchy chose principle over protocol. The King has essentially declared that some things matter more than tradition. And here's what makes this intervention even more powerful. Charles didn't just speak empty words, he acted immediately. Before leaving the Veterans event, the King announced a new Royal Foundation initiative. £10 million from his personal duchy funds would be dedicated to supporting veterans facing NHS delays. The money would provide private medical care for those waiting in pain. It would show Britain's heroes that someone still values their sacrifice, someone still remembers what they did for this country. The announcement was met with standing ovations from veterans in attendance, tears streaming down faces of men who had served in conflicts from the Falklands to Afghanistan, families of deceased servicemen openly weeping, and absolute horror from Downing Street. Because King Charles just did what the government refused to do. He put British veterans first. Within minutes, Starmer's team was scrambling. Emergency meetings were called. Press officers were writing statements. But what could they say? How do you respond when the King himself has publicly declared your government is failing the people? Any criticism of Charles would look like attacking the monarchy. Any defence of their policies would require explaining why veterans should wait while others get immediate care. They were trapped, completely trapped. And the timing couldn't have been worse because the Farage confrontation and the royal rebuke triggered a cascade of disasters that Labour never imagined possible. Within 2 hours of the debate ending, the British pound dropped against the dollar. Currency traders saw political instability and reacted instantly. Financial markets hate uncertainty. And what they were seeing was a government in crisis. £2.4 billion wiped from the FTSE 100 in afternoon trading. Pension funds lost value. Investment portfolios shrank. Within 4 hours, those losses had doubled to £4.8 billion.